Hey guys, it's Jake here with eTrailer. Today we've got a 2020 Nissan Frontier, and we're going to be adding these SumoSprings to it to help support the rear suspension. What these are designed to do is they will replace your bump stops on the factory rear suspension, and they are designed to be a little bit taller than your factory bump stops in order to provide that extra support when you're hauling a heavy load, whether it be in the bed or by the hitch on your Frontier. We're going to take a few measurements before we install our SumoSprings. And with no weight in the back of the truck, we're right at 35 inches. Now that we've got about 450 pounds worth of rock salt in the back of our truck, we can take another measurement. It looks like we're at about 33.5 inches, so that is about 1.5 inches a squat. And this truck doesn't have much more room to travel before we're bottoming out on that bump stop. Let's go ahead and take this over the test course and see how the suspension performs without our SumoSprings, and then we'll get them installed. Now to start off our test course, we're going to start with just a couple of little bumps. Oh, you can feel a lot of sag in the back end of this truck because it's already compressed. So when we go over a bump, there's not much more room to travel after that. When I'm hitting these bumps, the steering on the front feels very light. The steering wheel is kind of doing whatever it wants. And we're going at low speeds too, so this is not really a true example of what you might experience on the highway with high winds or anything like that to cause sway or any other problems you might have. But this is giving us a very good example of how soft the suspension is, even with 450 pounds in the bed. That's hardly nothing for what the owner of this vehicle typically hauls with it. He hauls a heavier trailer to do some side work here and there, and he's got usually about 400 pounds on the tongue or on the trailer hitch itself, so that's a lot more leverage than just in the bed of the truck directly over the axle. So in our little slalom here, driving back and forth, you can feel a little bit of body roll side to side. So hopefully those SumoSprings are going to help out with some of that roll and help to get this suspension a little bit more dialed in and provide some more support for us. Now with our SumoSprings installed and that same 450 pounds in the bed of our truck, take another measurement. We're at 34.5 inches. So that's only a 1/2 inch of sag compared to the 1.5 inches we had earlier. Now with suspension enhancement, it's designed to provide some support, not get it back to that factory ride. We want to have a little bit of sag because that's how we get the correct amount of weight on our ball mount or the tongue of our trailer for when we're going over bumps is really when it's going to count. We're not going to have that same drop that we had in the first run. So let's go ahead and take it through and see how the support is with our SumoSprings. To start off our test course with our SumoSprings installed, we've got that same double bump. You can tell there's a lot more support in the rear now. Now, these SumoSprings are still going to be relatively soft compared to a set of Timrins or something a little bit stiffer, but you can tell, yeah, on that double bump there, it still has that softness that we want, but it's supporting it. And that's definitely what we're looking for out of this set. Now coming around the turn, we didn't have a whole lot of body roll before, but I can definitely tell it's a little bit more solid back there. Coming over some small bumps in the parking lot, and I think it's handling quite a bit better than it was before. Again, we've only got about 450 pounds in the bed, so it's not a crazy heavy load, but it's definitely enough to engage our SumoSprings to really see how they work. Now the only thing is, with this kit, you're not going to have the adjustability like you would with a set of airbags, but for the example of this neighbor of ours that's that owns this vehicle, he doesn't need the adjustability. He's hauling the same load all the time, and it just so happens to be a decently heavy trailer that makes his truck squat a lot more than he feels comfortable with. So this set of SumoSprings is going to work out great for him. These are going to be made out of a microcellular urethane, which is essentially another term for foam that has tiny little air pockets in it that allow it to flex enough, but also be stiff enough to provide that support. They are also going to be a progressive spring, so the more and more they compress, the stiffer they get to provide that support. There are a couple options for jounce style replacement springs on our website. I do like these a lot because there's other types out there that are much stiffer. They may be able to hold a lot more than these can, but a lot of trucks such as the Frontier, they don't need that much support. These being rated for 1,400 pounds is more than enough support for this Frontier and what it can handle. And the reason for that is with those stiffer springs, you almost have to be loaded to half the capacity that they can carry in order for them to give you a comfortable ride. These, being that softer urethane material, when you go over a speed bump or anything unloaded, you're not going to feel a knock up against your frame, because those other springs, when they engage, since it's such a hard rubber, you'll feel it every time you go over a bump or anything like that. With these, you're not hardly going to feel it because they are that softer material. Now, with all that being said, let's go ahead and take the truck inside. We'll show you a comparison between these and the heavier duty version of these, and we'll show you how to get them installed. To begin our installation, we're going to start by removing our spare tire. You don't have to do this, but it's definitely going to give you a lot more room to work, and definitely more for us so you guys can see it a little bit better. Whether you're working with a lift like we have or you're rolling underneath your car, you can do this job from the ground, which makes it really nice. The one thing you want to keep in mind is you want to leave the tires on the ground and the vehicle's weight on the leaf spring pack. That is what's going to help keep all of this together when we loosen up these bolts. So what we need to do is loosen these bolts. You don't have to take them off all the way. On the other side, I've already completed that side, and we did have to take one off all the way in order to get this U-bolt high enough. Depending on what your threads look like and how old your vehicle is, you may have to use a little bit of penetrating oil in order to zip these off. So we'll just get them to where their threads are just holding on. And what we can do is we'll take this side, push it up, move it over, slide it out. And that's how you remove your factory bump stop. In your kit, you'll get a small tube of blue Loctite. What we need to do is we need to put a few lines of this on our bolt so that it helps to hold our spring in place. Then we just take our SumoSpring and we thread it on. Your instructions will say to put this bracket up in there first. But I found it easier, and I had more than enough room to be able to slide this whole assembly up there together. But before we put it up there, we want to show you just the sheer size difference. You can see how much travel our suspension would have to have in order for our frame to hit the top of this bump stop. And you can also see how very seldom it's used, but it has been used. So that means that this truck has been loaded down enough to be able to sag 3 to 4 inches to make contact with this. Whereas this, our new SumoSpring, is going to engage much sooner, and then it's going to, which essentially means it's going to start helping faster than our factory bump stops. So in order to get it in place, we do the same thing as we were removing it, and we will just take this leaf or this U-bolt, slide it up. Should be able to wiggle it in. May have to loosen the nuts a little bit more. There we go. And we'll do the same thing for the front one. Now this is the one I had trouble with on the other side. So we just went ahead and threaded those nuts off. We're gonna hook it around. We didn't actually pull the U-bolt out of the bracket, but we'll just slide those nuts back on. Now you want your U-bolts to be straight up and down, straddling the axle perfectly parallel to each other. And we're gonna hand tighten them to get our plate to re-engage with the bottom of the axle. And then we'll tighten them down with even pressure on each one. Now we need to torque these nuts to the factory specification. That is your manufacturer of your Nissan specifications. Again, we want to be putting a few cranks on one, move to another, so that we have even pressure on our U-bolts. After you have everything torqued down, that's going to be it for the installation. As you can see, it's very simple and straightforward. It just takes a couple of hand tools to get these installed.